Welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is alternative an alternative viewpoint, and the subject is trying to make sense of world affairs, and this is going to be part one. Now, before I actually start with this video, I just want to say I already made 6 parts of this discussing it, only to realize that after making the 6th part and trying to edit it, something went wrong with my mic. So for, say, 5.5 episodes, there was no sound, and I have to remake it. Okay, that was just a little bit of a background. So hopefully I will remember everything that I said in these 6 parts. So let's start. If you look at current world affairs, there's a lot of things that make no sense. And I don't know how to describe it. I will mention a couple of things. And this is the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. We can start with that. The point here is that the Americans instigated the coup in 2014 and supported it. And if you remember Newland's speech, she said that America has spent $5 billion on Ukraine in order to achieve this coup. That is basically what she said. And even in a telephone conversation, she was asked who's going to be the leader, and are the Europeans are not going to complain, and she said, fuck the EU. That was her words. So clearly, America did not consider the interests of Europe itself. But as you also know, or should know by now, if you have followed the pro-Russian commentators and the news, and you are not blinded by the propaganda of the Western media, which said that the Russian SMO conflict only started in February 2022. You know that started in 2014, and that there was an official coup against all definitions of a coup. And the two Western oblasts, provinces, I call them provinces, they are called oblasts in the Ukrainian situation. And they did not acknowledge the removal of their candidate that they voted for and who won the election in Ukraine democratically. And they didn't recognize the puppets that were placed by the Americans in control of Ukraine. They started basically a rebellion, if you want to call it. And the Ukrainian army tried to subdue them, and there was a lot of walkovers of soldiers to Donbass provinces, and they initiated a response, and they stopped the Ukrainian army advance, and that resulted in the Minsk I agreement. And then Poroshenko became into command, and he tried the second time. And again, the Ukrainian army was pushed back by the rebels, so to say, with Ukrainian military support. There is no evidence that Russia ever supplied them with any armament. And one must remember that during the Soviet era, Ukraine was a huge had a huge military-industrial complex. A lot of Soviet weapons were manufactured there, and also a huge amount of armament was stored in Ukraine. So it's from the storage of Soviet-era weapons that the rebel countries could support their military operations, as well as the Ukrainian government army can support their military exercise or actions. And this was all hunky-dory going on for 8 years, And in those 8 years, there were about 14,000 Ukrainians that died from the Donbas region alone, the republic, the two rebel republics, or oblasts, if you want to call them. And provinces, sorry, they were not republics yet. And in any case, the second defeat resulted in the Minsk II agreement. And now we've heard from Merkel and from Hollande that the West was never prepared to honor this or force Ukraine to honor this Minsk agreement, and it was only there to allow the Ukraine army to build up, train properly, and be ready for the final phase, the third military offensive against the Donbas provinces, and then recapture the land. Well, there's a little bit of a side thing, and that is Crimea. Crimea had a referendum shortly after 2014 and was incorporated into the Russian Federation. And why? Because, well, apart from that 90% or more than 90% voted for that referendum to be incorporated, the biggest warm water fleet port was Sevastopol, and that for the Russian army. So anybody that thought that they could overthrow Ukraine and thereby deny Russia access to their only port in the warm water, Mediterranean Sea, is really naive. So it was a done deal. Apart from the historic events that Crimea was never part of Ukraine, it was handed over freely by in 1956 by Khrushchev, and so on, made some part. It was never really part of Ukraine. It was always Russia. So that was a natural thing, but that's a sort of a sidetrack. And then the Americans came in and supposed to have trained the Ukrainian army. And according to NATO standard, and they have supposed to have provided them with weapons, Western weapons, and they trained them for 8 years. And that is the story that we all know. And then Russia started to act a little. Then there was talk about by Zelensky, who was the new president, that said, whoa, he has a threat from Russia, and Ukraine should never have given away their nuclear armament, which was never theirs, which was always Russia's. But that's beside the point. So that talk was very threatening, and the talk that Ukraine should become part of NATO, and that was also a red line for Russia. And then Russia decided he has to act and started to make demands, security demands from the West and from NATO, which is the natural process. It's totally logical. And then the West said no, and NATO said that they had the right to expand to the east, and Russia had no right for any security guarantees. And then Russia held a lot of military exercises on the border of Ukraine, and there was talk that Russia might invade Ukraine, which actually also happened in February. But what nobody tells you is that the third offensive of the Ukrainian army on the two Donbas provinces has already started on the 16th of February, and they increased the bombardment on Donetsk city and the Lugansk provinces up to increased significantly until it clearly showed that the Ukrainians wanted to invade the two Donbas provinces. And then together with the demand or the refusal to consider Russia's security concerns by the West and NATO, Putin decided 8 years was enough. He was hoping, in my opinion naively, that the West will consider and respect Russia, which never happened. And then he decided, that's it. The two Donbass provinces declared themselves independent republics, and that was done according to international law, totally legal. And as soon as they were established them as republics, Russia recognized them. They immediately applied for military assistance from Russia, totally legal, and Russia started their SMO, which was partial legal. Firstly, I recognize that, but I never revisited the map, and I never revisited the areas that the Russians invaded. So I made a separate video, and in my opinion, from a legal point of view, Russia made a sort of a mistake. And the only thing I can really argue about is the invasion from the north into the Kharkiv Oblast. And you can consider that as an invasion. And I don't understand why the Russians have done it. But I've also realized through now the months that the Russian command is not all-empowering, all-knowing, incredible, competent, and don't make mistakes and so on. And we saw that with the Isium withdrawal, the Lehman withdrawal, and then the final Kherson withdrawal. And we saw some other mistakes as well. Well, I know I'm going to get flack for that, but that is how pro-Russians don't want to accept it, accept the facts on the ground, and they still believe everything is hunky-dory. The Russians are the good people and the all-knowing and the all-conquering people, and the West is all dumb and don't know what they're doing. And, well, that's the narrative that's... On the Western side, naturally, we have the pro-Western side that say Russia will lose, Ukraine will win, and is winning, and so many Russians have died. And, well, the truth usually lies in between, and that is the purpose of this channel, to give you a more realistic type of analysis. So what has happened in the meantime is that the Ukrainians have used a lot of their stored Soviet-era type of weapons and ammunition. And a lot of it was destroyed by the Russians. I will acknowledge that. But I don't agree with the numbers that is being presented by the daily reports of the Russian military complex or daily military defense department. Because according to those numbers, more hardware has already been destroyed than Ukraine ever possessed, according to official figures. More than 100% more. Like double the number. And a typical example will be that they shot down 250 or so aircrafts, and that's 100% more than what they had officially. They haven't been resupplied by any other NATO country in terms of aircraft. And every second day another Su-25 or MiG-29 is being shot down. It just continues like that. That surely shows you that the Russians are also lying. But they are lying in a very dumb way, actually. But that's beside the point. So the NATO and America has provided them with lots of weapons now as a backup. We call the HIMARS and the M777 artillery pieces and the Caesars and the Gepards and the PZH 2000s, and you can go on and on and on. There's a lot of weapons that has actually been given to Ukraine. And now the NATO is running, so to say, out of weapons. Well, they're not running out of weapons. Even Putin has confirmed that. Ukraine is running out of Soviet-era type of weapons and ammunition. That, as Putin has admitted in his recent speech on the 21st of December, which I have referred to in any case previously. But the thing here is that there's a problem with this narrative. And the narrative is that America and the NATO, let's call them NATO, has trained the Ukrainians into NATO standards for the last 8 years. But somehow the Ukrainian army is not functioning in that way. They are not attacking according to that. They are running out of weapons But they have been trained on NATO weapons. Isn't that what they told us for the 8 years? So why cannot NATO deliver the more advanced weapon systems, like the Patriots, like the Avenger, like the NASAMS, air defense systems, like the Abram tanks, like the uh, German tanks? Why? They're supposed to be trained in that, so they're supposed to be able to operate it, but no, the narrative goes, it needs training. The Ukrainians soldiers have not been trained on these systems and are not ready to use them, and etc. and etc. and etc. Why not? I thought they have been trained. The America wanted a conflict with Russia. Yes, the narrative is that, oh, the first option was that no, they expected Russia never to invade Ukraine. That's bullshit. The weapons of the Russians are not good enough. That's bullshit. They showed the weapons, the advanced weapons, already in Syria, and they showed it in 2015. That means 7 years ago. The American military could see what the Russian weapons were. They knew what the Russian technology was. They should have at least investigated the Russian military-industrial complex and its manufacturing capability. There's a lot of money pumped into intelligence in America. So don't tell me this is all bullshit, that the narrative they didn't know, they were living in their own bubble. That's not on. Forget about that. That means that every American is an idiot, and they are not idiots. They are always clever. And don't, now forget about the story about cancel culture. If you don't talk the narrative, then you're canceled. No, the advice would have come through. I cannot accept that Europe, intelligence, military, scientific, academic versions, think tanks didn't know what was going on. I cannot believe it. I just refuse to believe it. And if I'm stubborn about that, then unfortunately, then I am dumb. I cannot support this narrative. In any case. So then think about the second plan, Plan B. Oh, okay, so Russia will fall in, and then we will sanction Russia's economy, and then Russia's economy will collapse, and they will withdraw out of Ukraine. Again, the narrative doesn't make sense. For the simple reason is that there was COVID, and there was COVID in 2019, 2020. There was a lot of money printed and supported it, but they were starting to get supply chain problems, and inflation started to rise up. They could see it in 2021. They could see the prices were increasing. They could see that inflation was going on. They could see that there were other problems. And logic tells you that if you do sanctions against another country, which has never worked, ever, in the history of sanctions, never ever, but if you do sanctions, you cut yourself off from a market. You withdraw your market, thereby you do your damage to your own industry. That's number one. You do damage to your own turnover, which is GDP. You do damage to your own tax base because you have less production, because you have lost a market share. And you know that the other countries will go into that gap and fill that gap, your competition. You will never regain what you will be able to regain, but at a huge cost and a huge effort. So sanctions has a two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And if the economy of the West already had problems, which was already evident in 2019, 20, and 21, then you do yourself something worse that you know you cannot really afford doing. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. If you know Europe has cheap energy from Russia, forget about this partial. America wants to sell their expensive LNG to Europe. Forget about that narrative. That is a limited quantity. It will never supply or fill the gap of the total gas needs of Europe. Forget about that. America could never fill it all. Any specialist in energy, in oil and gas that knows the market, and there are plenty of them, knows that there is a limited capacity, limited supply, long-term contracts. Nothing is immediately changed. If you want to increase it, you change from one over to another supply. That's not going to happen by chance, because it's like you have a supply, you have a positive here and a negative hole. And if you move the supply to that hole, then that hole is filled, but here will open another hole. And that has to be filled. It's a circular thing. It's like, if you know anything about electronics and transistors, that's a PNP type of situation. A positive ion and a hole, a negative ion hole, or whatever the sign is. There's a limited supply. I mean, we always talk about peak oil. Surely people have known it for a long time. So if there's an energy crunch, you deny Russia. Say typical example would be, so Saudi Arabia supplies oil to China. And then Germany comes and says, Saudi Arabia, give me oil. Okay. So he takes the oil that he would have delivered to China and gives it at a higher price to Germany. Now China has no oil. But Germany is not buying oil from Russia anymore. So now Russia is looking for a client. Oh, China has an opening. He needs, okay, so we supply the oil to China. And you see, it's just changing hands. But apart from that, it's all bullshit in any case. Sanctions are always sidelines. And we have heard about the transfer of Russian oil from a Russian tanker to a Western tanker. There in the middle of nowhere on the open seas, the oil is transferred. And then the oil is transferred, and that other ship is now going to the harbor, which happens in Scotland and England and Ireland. That's common knowledge. But it's not Russian oil anymore. It's now supposed to be somebody else's oil. No, it's still Russian oil. And the authorities know about that. But they say, no, that's not Russian oil anymore. And that's how Iran has survived all these years under these actions. It's like, I read this thing. So there's a record purchases of export of Russian gold to Switzerland. But Switzerland has sanctions against importing gold from Russia because that's part of the agreement. But then says it's about, in November it was $6.5 billion or something like that, or ton, so 6.5 ton of gold, Russian gold, that was sort of delivered to Switzerland. The Switzerland says, the authority says they didn't buy any Russian gold. But the company that actually bought the gold, they don't know who bought it, but somebody bought it. And Switzerland is one of the biggest refineries they don't consume the gold, they process the gold into, say, jewelry or whatever, some other form of thing. That gold has then been delivered from Dubai. But it's actually Russian gold. But because it's not delivered from Moscow directly to Switzerland, it was delivered probably from Russia to, say, Thailand to Dubai, and Dubai to Switzerland. It's not Russian gold anymore. It's bullshitting. So, okay, there's an oil embargo, but the oil delivered by pipeline to Germany and Poland, that was not sanctions, but the Germans and Poland said no, they will not import oil during a pipeline from Russia. They've done it some of themselves. There's no sanction that really requires them, but they have decided not to do it. And then a Russian company says, but we got an order from Germany and Poland to deliver oil. So publicly they say this, and then in the hindsight, they, via probably a third party, they may place an order for oil to be delivered to Poland from Russia and to Germany to their refineries. What the hell? In the meantime, Germany is supposed to be industrialized. And what did I hear? Well, yeah, one out of every 4 German company is considering relocating to America. As if America is a better option. That's the biggest joke in any case. 1 in 4, 25%. So the Germans do it willingly, destroy their own economy, destroy their own life. Doesn't make sense. Same with the UK. The UK is not important to have many gas and so on from, I think it was 3% from Russia. And now they're going to cut that off as well. And they're going to get now, next year they're going to try to make it up from gas from Qatar and from Azerbaijan. But as far as I know, Qatar has no spare capacity, so I'm not totally sure how they're going to achieve that. And then also, most of the gas that currently in the storage in Europe is Russian gas before the sanctions. So next year there's nothing from Russia. So where are they going to get the gas? And the gas is probably going to run out here in February, March. So how are they going to fill the tanks then? I don't know. If you read the articles by the experts, they also don't know. And those are the people that actually make the deals, that know every plant in the world and know every supplier that can deliver and how much and who are the clients. Those are the guys that know everything, but they also don't know where it's coming from. True experts. Inflation, some of the European countries, 20%. Germany, 10%. Germany, the first time, had a balance of payment deficit. That means they have imported more than they exported. It was a historic event. So the point here is that there's a lot of things that do not gel. It doesn't make sense. And this is the one that I'm going to discuss in part 2. Well, I will start in part 2 of this series. So in any case, so for today, unless you want to listen for another 5 hours, I'm going to start this part 1 here. And if you like what you listen or you want to hear more, subscribe, click on the bell thing to be notified. And until next time, cheers.